My wife called me at the office. I just inherited my aunt's fortune, 600 million. Pack your things and get out of our apartment now. When I got home, she had separation papers ready. I signed calmly and said, "Enjoy your new fortune." My name's Eliseo. I'm 49 years old, and exactly 47 days ago my wife called me to her office in the middle of the morning to tell me 5 words that destroyed 18 years of marriage. I've just inherited $600 million. Before I could even process that absurd figure, she pushed some papers towards me and added with an icy smile, "Pack your things and get out of our apartment immediately." When I got home that afternoon, all my personal documents were on the table. Separation papers already signed by her. Only my signature was missing. I sat down, read every line in silence, took the pen, and signed without a word. She was standing by the window watching me. When I finished, I stood up, looked her in the eyes, and told her with all the calmness in the world, "Enjoy your new fortune, Nyla." And she laughed. She laughed loudly as if she'd just heard the best joke of her life. What she didn't know at that moment, what she couldn't even imagine, was that 47 days later that laugh would become the worst mistake of her existence. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got here, because this story doesn't start with shouts or slammed doors. It starts much earlier, in a life so ordinary it could be anyone's. I'm a civil engineer. I work for a medium-sized construction company. I supervise works, review plans, sign permits. I leave home at 6 a.m. when it's still dark. I return at 7 p.m. when it's already dark again. For 18 years, I did exactly that. I paid every bill, every apartment installment, every dinner, every service. There was never a lack of food on the table. Our electricity was never cut off. We were never late with anything. We were stable. We were secure. We were, as Nyla started saying in recent years, boring. Nyla worked in HR for a medium-sized company. She earned well. Between the two of us, we had enough to live comfortably, not rich, but not strapped either. Vacations once a year, a decent car, a 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood. I thought that was enough. I thought building a life together meant exactly that. Stability, respect, companionship. How naive I was. She changed about 3 years ago. She started following millionaire accounts on social media, women with designer handbags, imported cars, trips to Dubai, men with watches that cost more than our apartment, influencers selling success and abundance manifestation courses. Nyla spent hours watching those perfect lives, those lives that shone. And every time she looked at me, I saw disappointment in her eyes, as if I was living proof she'd made the wrong choice. We never argued about it. She didn't yell. She didn't fight. She just distanced herself. She answered in monosyllables, ate looking at her phone. She slept with her back to me. I tried to talk several times. I asked her if she was okay, if she needed anything, if there was anything I could do differently. She always said the same thing. "I'm fine, Eliseo, just tired from work." And I believed her, or wanted to believe her. There was one person in our lives Nyla openly despised. Her Aunt Melissa, a 78-year-old woman who lived alone in an old house on the outskirts of the city. Melissa never married, never had children. She was one of those people the family mentioned in passing, almost with embarrassment, eccentric, they said, strange, bitter. Nyla spoke of her with disdain. She said she was a crazy old woman who wasted her life accumulating junk in that huge, neglected house, that she never did anything productive, that she was a waste of existence. I met Melissa at a family gathering 15 years ago. She struck me as an intelligent, ironic woman, with sharp eyes that saw more than people believed. After that meeting, I don't know why, I started visiting her. At first it was by chance. I was passing near her house returning from a construction site and stopped to say hello. She made tea. We talked about books, about ancient architecture, about the city we'd both seen change. She invited me back, and I went back every Sunday for 15 years. Nyla never knew about those visits, not because I hid them, but because she never asked. On Sunday mornings I'd leave. She assumed I was going to the gym or for a walk. She never showed interest. Melissa and I became true friends. She told me stories of her youth, of the businesses she'd quietly managed, of the decisions she made when women didn't make decisions. I'd fix things around her house, Change light bulbs, repair faucets, prune the garden. We were mutual company, nothing more. 4 months ago, Melissa called me on a Tuesday night. Her voice sounded weak. She said she didn't feel well, that I needed to take her to the hospital. I went immediately. She spent 3 days hospitalized. The doctors said her heart was failing. She knew it. She told me without drama, like commenting on the weather. Eliseo, I have weeks left, maybe a month. I want you to know you've been the only person who treated me like a human being in recent years. I thank you for every Sunday. 2 weeks before she died, Melissa handed me a wooden box. It was light. Inside were folded papers, yellowed envelopes. She told me, keep this. Open it only after I'm gone. Don't ask now, just trust me. I nodded, put the box in my car, took it to my office, and put it in a cabinet. I didn't give it much thought. I thought it would be old photos, sentimental letters, memories from another era. Melissa died on a Thursday morning. I was with her. Nyla didn't go to the hospital once. The funeral was on Saturday. 12 people attended. Nyla came with me, but she stayed behind, checking her phone. She didn't shed a tear. When we left, she commented, "At least the old woman's show is over." Those were her exact words. And then came that Tuesday, the Tuesday that divided my life into a before and an after. It was 11 a.m. I was at the construction site reviewing structural calculations when my phone rang. It was Nyla. Her voice sounded strange, sharp, electric. "Eliseo, come to my office right now. It's urgent. I need you to come now." She didn't give me time to ask anything. She hung up. I felt a chill. I asked my boss, Enrique, a 55-year-old man who was always fair with me, for permission. I explained my wife had called me urgently, that it seemed serious. He looked at me worried, put a hand on my shoulder, and said, "Go calmly, Eliseo. Family comes first. I hope it's nothing serious." I thanked him and ran to my car. During the 25-minute drive, my mind imagined 1,000 scenarios: an accident, an illness, legal problems, something with her mother, something with me. I drove faster than usual with my stomach churning. I arrived at the building where Nyla worked, a corporate glass and steel place. I took the elevator to the 4th floor. I greeted the receptionist who knew me by sight because I sometimes picked Nyla up. She returned my greeting, but her expression was odd, as if she knew something I didn't, as if she felt sorry for me. I knocked on Nyla's office door. I heard her voice from inside. "Come in." I entered. She was sitting behind her desk, but she didn't look like the same woman I'd had breakfast with that morning. She was wearing a gray suit she only wore for important meetings. Her hair was perfectly styled, impeccable makeup, and that smile, that huge, brilliant smile, but completely devoid of warmth. It was the smile of someone who just won something very big. She motioned for me to close the door. I closed it. I stood in front of her desk, like an employee waiting for instructions. "Sit down, Eliseo." She said my name as if I were a stranger. I sat in the chair opposite her. On the desk was a stack of documents, official papers with seals, manila folders, aligned pens, everything too prepared, too organized. She clasped her hands on the desk and looked me straight in the eyes. "I received a call this morning from my Aunt Melissa's lawyer." Her voice sounded different, sharp, excited, almost childish. I nodded, expecting bad news about the will, maybe debts, legal problems, but what she said next paralyzed me. It turns out my aunt wasn't the crazy old woman we all thought. It turns out she had properties, investments, shares in companies nobody knew existed. She paused dramatically, savoring the moment. The lawyer informed me I inherited everything. $600 million. Eliseo, $600 million. I repeated the figure in my mind. $600 million. It was an obscene amount, impossible to imagine. More money than we could spend in 10 lifetimes. I felt a mixture of shock and happiness. Happiness for Nyla, for us, for the future we could build. I smiled at her. I told her, "Nyla, that's incredible. I can't believe it. Our life has just completely changed. We could do everything we always dreamed of. Travel, help our families, secure our future, even help others. It's a miracle." She raised a hand, a dry, cutting gesture, as if stopping traffic. Her smile grew colder. "Our future?" "No, Eliseo, my future. Those 4 words fell like stones. She pushed the papers towards me. They were separation documents, divorce, asset distribution, terms and conditions. Everything already drafted, everything already prepared. Only signatures were missing. The date on the documents was 2 days prior. 2 days. She'd planned this before even receiving news of the inheritance. Or maybe she already knew. She explained with terrifying calm that she'd felt trapped for years, that our life was small, mediocre, without sparkle, that I was a good man, yes, responsible, hardworking, predictable, but that wasn't enough, that she always knew she deserved more, that she was destined for something greater than paying bills and watching TV on Friday nights, that this inheritance was her opportunity to break free, to be who she really was, a powerful, independent, free woman. She said all that without raising her voice, without yelling, without crying, as if reading a corporate report. And there I was sitting across from her, listening as 18 years of marriage evaporated in a 3-minute speech. I asked if there was someone else. She shook her head. It's not that, Eliseo. There's no other man. I just don't want this life anymore. I don't want you anymore. You're a good man, but you're a small man, and I don't want to be small anymore. I took the papers, read them slowly. Division of assets. She kept everything except my personal belongings and my car. The apartment was in her name from the beginning. It was a gift from her parents when we got married. I'd only paid the expenses all these years. She didn't ask for alimony. She didn't ask for anything. She just wanted me to leave, to disappear from her new luminous life. There was a clause that said I had to vacate the apartment within 24 hours. I looked at Nyla. She watched me with that smile, perhaps expecting me to beg, to cry, to make a scene, but something inside me died at that moment, or perhaps it ignited. I don't know. I picked up the pen she'd strategically placed next to the papers. I signed each page slowly, without trembling. When I finished, I put the pen on the desk, stood up, and looked her in the eyes. Enjoy a new fortune, Nyla. I hope it makes you very happy. And then she laughed. It wasn't a small, uncomfortable laugh. It was a loud, liberated laugh, full of relief and triumph, as if she'd just heard the funniest joke in the world. Thanks for making it easy, Eliseo. You were always predictable. That's exactly what I expected from you. I left that office with my head held high, but my chest completely empty. I drove back to the apartment, our apartment, her apartment. I went upstairs, opened the door, everything was the same. The living room with the same furniture we'd bought together, the kitchen where I made coffee every morning, the bedroom where we'd slept side by side for almost 2 decades. But it wasn't my home anymore. On the dining room table were my documents, passport, birth certificate, university degrees, car papers, all organized in a folder. She prepared everything while I was at work, efficient to the end. I went to the bedroom, took 2 suitcases from the closet, and started packing. Clothes, shoes, personal items. I didn't take anything that belonged to both of us. No photos, no memories, nothing, just my things. It took me 2 hours. When I finished, I loaded the suitcases into my car. I took one last look around the apartment. 18 years summarized in 2 suitcases and a folder of documents. I closed the door without looking back. I drove aimlessly for 20 minutes until I saw an economy hotel. I rented a room for a week. I brought my things up, sat on the bed, and looked at the empty room. A single bed, an old TV, a window overlooking a parking lot. This was it. Now, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness, just a strange emptiness, as if I were floating outside my own body. I picked up my phone, thought about calling someone, but who? I had no close family. My friends were more like work acquaintances. Nyla had been my world for so long, I'd forgotten to build my own. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling of that hotel room, listening to cars pass on the street, the muffled voices of other guests, the hum of the old air conditioner. I reviewed every moment of the last 18 years, looking for signs I should have seen. They were all there. The way Nyla stopped asking me how my day was, the way she stopped touching me, even casually, the way her eyes lit up with the lives of strangers online, but dimmed when she looked at me. All the signs were there, and I chose not to see them because it was easier to believe we were happy. At 6 a.m., I showered, dressed in the same work clothes as always, and drove to the construction site. Enrique saw me arrive and immediately approached. He asked how everything was, if my wife was okay. I told him the truth, simple and direct. We separated yesterday. Enrique. She inherited a lot of money and decided she didn't need me in her life anymore. He was silent for a moment. Then he gave me an awkward but sincere hug. I'm so sorry, Eliseo. If you need time, take it. I shook my head. I need to work. I need to keep my mind busy. He nodded, understood. The following days were mechanical. I woke up, worked, ate something quick, went back to the hotel, slept poorly, repeated. I didn't look for another apartment yet. I didn't have the energy for that. The hotel was enough. A week after the Express divorce, something changed. I started seeing Nyla everywhere, not physically, but virtually. She opened accounts on all social media platforms: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Her first post was a photo of her with expensive sunglasses, sitting in an elegant restaurant with a caption that read, "New life, new me, no limits." The comments exploded. Friends I didn't know, she had congratulated her. Strangers wrote, asking her secret. She replied with money emojis and champagne glasses. 3 days later, she posted a photo next to a shiny red sports car. The description read, "When the universe rewards you for breaking free from what held you back." The car easily cost $200,000. Like soared past 1,000 in a few hours. People adored her, envied her, wanted to be her. Nyla became a small local celebrity overnight. Real influencers started following her. Brands wrote to her for collaborations. She uploaded stories every hour. Breakfasts in five-star hotels. Shopping in stores where a handbag cost more than my monthly salary. Spa treatments, private yoga classes. A perfect, filtered, brilliant life. A week after that, Nyla quit her job. She announced it in a video where she was sitting on the terrace of some luxurious place with the city in the background. She said she'd spent too many years being a slave to a schedule, to a boss, to a life that wasn't hers, that now she was free, that we all deserved to pursue our dreams. The video went viral in our city. 30,000 views, 500 comments. Most were words of support, of admiration. Some comments asked about me, where her husband was, what had happened to their marriage. She never answered those questions. She simply erased me from her narrative as if I'd never existed. I didn't follow her on social media, but people sent me screenshots, coworkers, acquaintances, even the son of the woman who cleaned the offices. Everyone wanted to know if it was true, if she'd really inherited $600 million, if she'd really left me. I always replied the same. Yes, it's true. I wish them the best. People didn't know what to say after that. Some tried to comfort me. Others looked at me as if I were a fool for having signed those papers so quickly. But what else could I do? She didn't want me. I wasn't going to beg someone to stay with me out of pity or convenience. A month after the separation, Nyla hosted a party. She posted everything in real time. An event in a private hall of a luxury hotel. Waiters with champagne trays, chef-prepared food, live DJ. She invited 200 people. Many didn't even know her before. They just wanted to be near the woman with $600 million. In one of the videos, she was in the center of the dance floor, surrounded by people, dancing with a glass in her hand, shouting, "This is freedom. This is really living." The camera followed her as if she were a movie star. In the middle of that party, someone asked her about her ex-husband. The video captured the moment. Nyla laughed, took a long drink from her glass, and said, "My ex was a good man, but he was small. He had small dreams, small ambitions, a small life. I needed more, and now I have it. Sometimes you have to let go of the baggage to fly." People applauded, toasted her courage, her brutal honesty. That video reached me too. I watched it 3 times. Each time I felt less, as if my capacity for pain had run out. While Nyla built her empire of appearances, I looked for a small apartment, a simple place, 1 bedroom, in a quiet neighborhood. I rented the first place I saw. I didn't care what it looked like, I just needed a roof. I bought basic furniture, a bed, a table, 2 chairs, a used armchair. I put my clothes in the closet. I hung a single photo on the wall, a mountain landscape I took on a vacation 10 years ago. That was it. My new life fit into 40 square meters. I kept working, kept delivering. Enrique assigned me more responsibilities, I think to keep me busy. I accepted everything. I arrived early, left late. On weekends, I worked on personal projects, made calculations, reviewed plans, anything to not think, to not remember that a month ago I had a wife and a life I thought was solid. Sundays were the worst. Sundays before I visited Melissa. Now I had nowhere to go. It was on one of those empty Sundays that I remember the box. The wooden box Melissa had given me weeks before she died. I kept it in my office, and with all the chaos of the divorce, I'd completely forgotten it. The following Monday, I went straight to the cabinet where I'd left it. There it was covered in dust. I took it out, cleaned it with my shirt sleeve. It was a simple dark wooden box with an old metal clasp. It was light. I took it to my new apartment that night. I put it on the table and stared at it for 10 minutes. Part of me didn't want to open it. It was the last thing connecting me to Melissa, and opening it meant closing that chapter too. But she told me to do it after her death. Almost 2 months had passed. I took a deep breath and opened the clasp. Inside were carefully folded papers. I took them out one by one. The first was a handwritten letter in Melissa's shaky handwriting. It read, "Eliseo, if you're reading this, it's because I'm no longer here. I want you to know that the Sundays you spent with me were the happiest days of my last years. You treated me with dignity when my own family forgot me. That's why I made a decision you might not understand now. But you will soon. Trust me one last time." Beneath the letter were legal documents. I spread them on the table. They were copies of a will. Melissa's will, dated 3 months before her death. I read it slowly, not fully understanding at first. Then I reread it, and a third time my heart started beating faster. The words were clear, certified, sealed by a lawyer. Melissa had left her entire fortune to a single person, and that person wasn't Isla. The will had my name, Eliseo Marquez, sole beneficiary of all Melissa Contreras' assets, properties, investments, and holdings. I read that line 10 times, 20 times. It couldn't be real. It had to be a mistake. I searched through the papers for something to explain this. I found another document, a notarized letter from lawyer Camilo Herrera dated 2 months ago. It explained Melissa had secretly updated her will, that she'd given specific instructions not to reveal this information until 30 days after her death, that the previous will, the one leaving everything to Nyla, had been officially revoked. There were more papers, bank statements, property titles, stock certificates, all in Melissa's name and all legally transferred to my name according to the new will. The numbers were absurd. Properties valued at $120 million, investments in funds that generated millions annually, shares in tech companies that had multiplied in value, bank accounts with balances I never imagined seeing written. The estimated total was $640 million. Not 600, 640. I sat on the floor of my empty apartment with all those papers around. My mind didn't process what I was seeing. Melissa had left everything to me. The man who only visited her on Sundays, who fixed her faucets and pruned her garden, who drank tea with her and listened to her stories. Meanwhile, Nyla, her blood niece, the woman who never visited her, who called her a crazy old woman, who openly despised her, had received nothing, or worse than nothing. I searched further through the papers and found another envelope. Inside were copies of documents Melissa had left with lawyer Camilo with instructions to deliver them to Nyla. There were papers of old debts, loans Melissa had made in the family's name decades ago, documents that seemed valuable, but were actually just historical records without any real monetary value. I understood then what had happened. The lawyer had given those papers to Nyla, making her believe they were the inheritance, that those documents represented properties, investments, the complete fortune. Nyla, in her anxiety and greed, hadn't reviewed them carefully. She only saw legal papers, official seals, big numbers, and assumed she was rich. The lawyer never lied to her directly. He only gave her what Melissa left for her and allowed Nyla to draw her own conclusions. It was a perfect trap, a legal trap, cruel, and absolutely brilliant. Melissa knew exactly what she was doing. She knew Nyla would rush to celebrate, to spend, to show off. She knew she'd destroy her life in the process, and she knew I'd eventually open this box and discover the truth. On the last page of the letter Melissa left me, it said, "Don't seek revenge, Eliseo. Revenge is already underway. Just watch, and when it's all over, use this money to do some good. Be the man you always were, the man who visited me without expecting anything in return." I put all the papers back in the box, hid it at the bottom of my closet. I didn't tell anyone, not Enrique, not acquaintances. I didn't even call lawyer Camillo yet. I just waited, because if I'd learned anything over the years, it's that patience always reveals the truth. And the truth was about to destroy Nyla in ways she couldn't imagine. The following days, I continued my routine as if nothing had changed. Work, apartment, sleep, repeat. But now I observed Nyla's every move on social media, every purchase she made, every luxury she allowed herself. 3 days after I opened the box, she posted photos of a trip to Miami. Beach hotel, exclusive restaurants, shopping in designer stores. She uploaded videos walking through the streets with bags from expensive brands. In one story she wrote, "When you can have everything, why settle for little? The universe rewards the brave." A week later, she announced she'd bought a new apartment, a penthouse in the city's most exclusive area. She said the old apartment, the one we'd shared, was too small for her new life, too full of mediocre memories. She uploaded a video tour of her new place. Floor-to-ceiling windows, huge terrace, luxury finishes. She said she paid $3 million in cash. The comments exploded. People congratulated her, envied her, asked her what it felt like to live the dream. What nobody knew, what Nyla also didn't know, was that she hadn't paid anything in cash. I checked public records from a library computer. The apartment was in her name, yes, but with a huge mortgage. She'd used the fake papers the lawyer gave her as collateral to get loans. The banks, seeing official documents with Melissa's name and large figures, had approved million-dollar loans. Nyla was living a fantasy built on debt, and she had no idea. The red sports car she showed off wasn't hers either. She'd gotten it with a platinum credit card they gave her based on her supposed inheritance, a card with a $200,000 limit she'd already spent completely. The jewelry, the clothes, the trips, everything was with borrowed money. Money the banks expected her to pay back with the $600 million they thought she had. $600 million that never existed. 3 weeks passed. Nyla kept uploading daily content. She'd become a real influencer. 50,000 followers. Brands paid her to promote products. But what she earned from that wasn't even 1% of what she spent. She organized another party bigger than the last. She rented a yacht for 100 people. She hired a professional photographer. She posted every moment. In a video, someone asked her if she didn't miss her ex-husband. She replied with a smile, "Miss? What exactly? Miss mediocrity? Miss living in a small box with small dreams? No thanks. I'm where I'm supposed to be." While she built her castle of lies, I finally called lawyer Camillo. We met in his office on a Thursday afternoon. He was a 60-year-old man with thick glasses and a serious but kind expression. He confirmed everything. The will was real, valid, unbreakable. Melissa had planned it months in advance. She'd left specific instructions to wait 30 days after her death to contact me. She wanted Nyla to have time to show herself as she truly was, to reveal herself completely. Camillo explained Nyla had gone to his office 2 days after the funeral, demanding her inheritance. He gave her the papers Melissa left for her, documents that seemed valuable, but a competent lawyer would have identified as useless in minutes. But Nyla was so desperate to believe she was rich, she didn't hire anyone to review them. She just took them to the bank, got loans, and started spending. Camillo looked at me with something akin to pity. Melissa knew exactly what her niece would do. She predicted everything. I asked him how much time we had before Nyla discovered the truth. He reviewed some papers and told me, "The banks will start requesting payments in approximately 2 weeks. When she can't pay, they'll investigate, discover the documents don't back anything real. Then the collapse will come. It'll be fast, and it'll be public. I asked him if there was anything I could do to stop it, to protect her somehow. Camillo shook his head. There's nothing to do, Eliseo. She signed contracts, acquired debts, all legally. The consequences are hers. I left that office with a huge weight on my chest. Part of me, a small but persistent part, still felt something for Nyla. Not love that had died, but a kind of pity. 18 years don't get erased in 2 months. I knew her when she was different, when she still had real dreams, when she truly smiled. That woman no longer existed, but her ghost haunted me. 2 weeks passed exactly as lawyer Camillo had predicted. I kept working, living in my small apartment, maintaining my simple routine, but every night I checked Nyla's social media, watching as her crystal castle prepared to shatter. She kept uploading content nonstop. Breakfasts in luxurious places, professional photo shoots, exclusive events. She'd hired a personal assistant, a young girl who followed her with a camera documenting every moment of her perfect life. Nyla had become her own reality show. In one of her last videos, before everything collapsed, she was in a luxury spa receiving a facial treatment that cost $2,000. She spoke directly to the camera with a towel wrapped around her head and cucumber slices over her eyes. She said, "People ask me if I feel guilty for leaving my ex-husband. And the answer is no, zero guilt, because life is too short to live in a cage out of loyalty. I owe it to myself first, always." The comments applauded her brutal honesty. They called her an inspiration, an icon, a queen. She fed on that validation as if it were oxygen. On Monday of the 3rd week, everything began to unravel. Nyla posted nothing in the morning, which was strange. She always uploaded something before 8 a.m. Good morning from my terrace, coffee with a view, positive affirmations. But that day, silence. At 2 p.m., a story finally appeared. It wasn't in a luxurious place. It was in her car, her face without makeup, red eyes. The text read, "Sometimes the universe tests you. Stay tuned." Without further explanation, comments started immediately. "What happened? Are you okay? We send you love." She didn't respond to any. That night, I received a message from an unknown number. It was from Karina, a distant cousin of Nyla, who was always kind to me. The message read, "Eliseo, I don't know if you've heard, but Nyla is in trouble. The bank called her today. Something about false documents and unpaid debts. She's desperate. I thought you should know." I didn't reply to the message. I just read it 3 times and put away my phone. The next day, Tuesday, Nyla posted a long video. She was sitting on the floor of her empty penthouse. No visible furniture behind her. Her voice trembled. She explained there'd been a misunderstanding with the inheritance documents, that the bank had made a mistake, that they were reviewing everything with lawyers, that it was only a matter of time before it was resolved. But that in the meantime, she needed to be transparent with her community. She'd paused some purchases. She was being more careful, but everything was under control. The comments this time were different. Less support, more questions. This sounds weird. What kind of misunderstanding? Why would the bank make a mistake like that? She didn't respond to any. On Wednesday, Nyla deleted all her recent posts. Her feed was almost empty. Only 3 old photos from before the supposed inheritance remained. Normal photos, no luxuries. Her follower count started to drop 1,000, 2,005, 000 in one day. People smell failure miles away. Nobody wants to follow someone who's falling. That same afternoon, lawyer Camillo called me. He said Nyla had gone to his office demanding explanations, screaming he tricked her, that the documents he gave her were useless. Camillo calmly explained he only delivered what Melissa left for her, that he never said those papers were worth $600 million, that she assumed that on her own. Nyla, according to Camillo, broke down in his office. She cried for 20 minutes. She begged him to help her, to talk to the banks, to do something. Camillo told her the truth. There's nothing to do. The contracts you signed are binding. The debts you acquired are real, and the inheritance you thought you had never existed. Then Nyla asked the inevitable. She asked who had really inherited Melissa's fortune. Camillo, following the will's confidentiality instructions, refused to reveal that information. He told her that was none of her business. that she needed to focus on resolving her immediate legal problems. On Thursday, Nyla tried to sell the sports car. She posted it online for $150, trying to recover some money quickly. But the car was in the bank's name until she finished paying off the credit card. She couldn't sell it legally. The same happened with the expensive jewelry she'd bought. Everything was financed. Nothing was really hers. She tried to return the designer clothes to the stores, but most she'd already worn in photos and videos. The stores refused to accept returns. On Friday, the worst news arrived. The bank initiated legal proceedings against her for fraud. They alleged she'd presented false documents to obtain million-dollar loans. Nyla tried to explain it was a mistake, that she believed the documents were real, that she had no intention of deceiving anyone, but the bank didn't believe her. To them, she was a scammer, someone who'd lived 2 months of luxury with borrowed money under false pretenses. The news reached local media. News sites published articles. Local influencer faces bank fraud charges. Woman who flaunted millionaire inheritance on social media turns out to be bankrupt. The comments on those articles were brutal. The people who'd admired her now tore her down. They called her a liar, a fake, pathetic. They shared screenshots of her old posts flaunting wealth. They mocked her phrases about the universe and abundance. Someone found the video where she talked about me, where she called me small, where she said I was a burden. They shared it thousands of times with comments like, "And now, who's the small one? Who ended up being the burden?" Instant karma. I read those comments from a distance. I didn't feel satisfaction, only a deep sadness. On Saturday, Nyla uploaded her last public video. She was in her car, without makeup, hair uncombed, crying. She said everything had been a horrible mistake, that she never meant to deceive anyone, that she genuinely believed she'd inherited that fortune, that she made decisions based on information that turned out to be false, that she was facing the consequences of her actions, and that she asked for forgiveness from her community, from the brands that trusted her, from her family. And then, after a long pause, she said my name. Eliseo, if you're watching this, I made the biggest mistake of my life. Leaving you was the stupidest decision I've ever made. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed to say it. The video ended there. I didn't reply. I didn't call her. I didn't do anything because doing something meant entering her chaos, and I no longer belonged there. On Sunday, Nyla closed all her social media accounts, disappeared from the internet completely. Her personal assistant posted a message on her own account saying she no longer worked for Nyla and wished her the best in her recovery process. The 50,000 followers Nyla had evaporated in silence. Her moment of fame had lasted exactly 2 months. It shot up like a rocket and fell just as quickly. That same afternoon, I received another call from lawyer Camillo. He told me we needed to meet urgently, that there were new developments. I went to his office early Monday. When I entered, I saw papers scattered on his desk. Camillo looked tired. He explained Nyla had hired a defense attorney, an aggressive type who was looking for ways to save her from the fraud charge. That lawyer had investigated Melissa's will. He'd discovered a new beneficiary existed, and now they were formally requesting to know my identity. They wanted to argue I'd manipulated Melissa into changing the will, that I'd brainwashed a vulnerable old woman. I asked Camillo if they had any chance of proving that. He firmly shook his head. Melissa acted of her own free will. I have medical documents proving she was in full possession of her mental faculties when she updated the will. I have testimonies, video recordings where she explains her reasons. It's unbreakable, but this means your name will come to light soon. Nyla will know you inherited everything, and when she knows, I have no idea how she'll react. I told Camillo I was prepared for whatever came, that I had nothing to hide, that I'd visited Melissa for 15 years expecting absolutely nothing in return, that she made her decision alone based on who was truly present in her life. Camillo nodded, but warned me things could get ugly. That Nyla was desperate, and desperate people do unpredictable things. He recommended I keep a low profile, not talk to journalists if they contacted me, and especially not seek any contact with Nyla. I promised him I'd follow his advice. I left that office knowing the secret wouldn't last much longer, and I was right. 3 days later, on Wednesday afternoon, I was reviewing some plans at the construction site when Enrique approached with a strange expression. He told me there was a woman asking for me at the entrance who seemed agitated, who insisted on speaking with me immediately. I didn't need to ask who it was. I walked down the stairs of the construction building and saw her standing by the security fence. It was Nyla. I hadn't seen her in person since that day in her office when I signed the divorce papers. Almost 2 months had passed, but it felt like years. She looked completely different. No makeup, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, normal clothes, jeans, and a gray blouse, deep dark circles under her eyes. She lost weight, but what struck me most was her gaze. There was no longer that spark of superiority, that arrogant confidence, only fear and desperation. I approached slowly. The metal fence separated us. She spoke first. Her voice was small, broken. "Eliseo, I need to talk to you, please." I told her we had nothing to talk about, that she'd made it very clear what she thought of me and our life together, that I'd moved on as she asked. Nyla shook her head, tears already streaming down her cheeks. "I made a mistake, a horrible mistake. I didn't know what I was doing. I was blinded by the possibility of having more, of being more. But now I've lost everything, Eliseo, and I found out something. I found out you inherited my aunt's fortune, that all this time you had the money I thought was mine." There was the truth finally exposed. I didn't deny it. I simply nodded. She looked at me as if expecting an explanation, a justification. I told her the truth. Your aunt and I were friends for 15 years. I visited her every Sunday. She told me about her life. I listened to her. I fixed things around her house. She made me tea. I never expected anything in return. I never knew she had money until after she died. She decided to leave me her fortune because I was the only person who treated her with dignity in her last years. It wasn't manipulation. It was a consequence of being a decent human being. Nyla completely broke down, clinging to the metal fence as if it were the only thing keeping her standing. She begged me, pleaded with me to help her, to share some of the inheritance with her, that after all she was Melissa's blood niece, that she deserved something, that I was a good man, that I'd always been generous, that I should please save her from this nightmare. I looked at her in silence for several seconds, then reminded her of her own words. I reminded her how she'd thrown me out of our apartment without a second thought, how she'd called me small in videos millions saw, how she celebrated freeing herself from the burden I represented. I told her, "Nyla, you made your decisions based on what you believed was your best future. I wasn't in that future. You made it very clear I wasn't enough for you. Now I'm making my decisions based on my future, and you're not in it. Not out of revenge, not out of cruelty, simply because there's nothing left between us. We signed papers, we divorced. It's over. I wish you the best in resolving your legal problems, but I can't help you. I won't help you." She screamed. She called me selfish, cruel, heartless. She told me I was worse than her, that at least she'd been honest about not wanting me. But I, in her words, was enjoying watching her suffer. I replied calmly, "I'm not enjoying any of this. But I'm not going to rescue you from the consequences of your own actions either. We grew up together, Nyla. We built a life together, and you destroyed it in a phone call because you thought you had something better. Now you live with that decision. I live with mine." I turned and walked back to the construction site. She kept shouting my name, but I didn't turn around. Enrique was waiting upstairs with a worried expression. He asked if I was okay. I told him yes. It was just my ex-wife processing the end of something that was already dead. He didn't ask further. That night, back in my apartment, I sat on the used armchair I'd bought and wondered if I'd done the right thing, if I should have shown more compassion, more mercy. But then I remembered the laugh. That laugh when I signed the divorce papers, that laugh that said, "You're so predictable, so easy to discard." And I knew I'd made the right decision. The following days were a local media whirlwind. Someone leaked the information that I was the true heir. News sites published updated articles. Ex-husband she abandoned turns out to inherit $600 million. Woman leaves husband believing she inherited fortune, but the money was his all along. The comments exploded. Thousands of people opining on a situation they didn't truly know. Some called me vengeful. Others said it was perfect poetic justice. Some criticized Nyla. Others criticized me for not helping her in her time of need. Journalists tried to contact me. They left messages at my work on my phone. Everyone wanted an interview. Everyone wanted my version of the story. I followed Camillo's advice and didn't respond to any. I deleted the messages without reading them completely. I focused on my work, on my routine, on maintaining my sanity amidst the circus. Enrique, in an act of incredible loyalty, told all the reporters who showed up at the construction site that I wasn't available and wouldn't be. A week after that encounter at the construction site, I received a message from Karina, Nyla's cousin. She told me Nyla had to move out of the penthouse, that the bank had repossessed it, that she was living temporarily with her mother in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, that her mother was furious with her because of the debts and the public shame, that Nyla spent her days in her room, not leaving, not talking to anyone. Karina asked me if there really was nothing I could do, if I couldn't find in my heart some compassion for someone I'd shared almost 2 decades with. I replied to Karina with honesty. I told her, compassion doesn't mean rescuing someone from the consequences of their actions. Nyla is an adult. She made decisions. Those decisions had results. I didn't create this situation. She did. If I help her, I'd be sending the message that it's okay to treat people as disposable when you think you have something better. I'm not going to send that message. Karina didn't reply after that. Nyla's legal process slowly moved forward. Her defense attorney tried every possible angle. He argued she was a victim of an elaborate deception, that Melissa had manipulated documents to confuse her, that I had influenced the old woman. But Camillo had all the necessary proof. Videos of Melissa lucidly explaining her reasons, medical documents certify her mental health, testimonies from other lawyers who attested to the creation of the will. Every defense argument was methodically dismantled. Finally, 2 months after the initial collapse, Nyla accepted a settlement. She pleaded guilty to financial negligence and misuse of documents. It wasn't intentional fraud, the judge ruled, but it was criminal responsibility. She was sentenced to 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and the obligation to pay all her debts. The debts totaled over $300,000. Without a job, without savings, without anything. Those debts would haunt her for years, perhaps decades. The news of the sentence was in all local media. The comments, as always, were wild. Some celebrated. Others felt pity. I just felt empty. There were no winners in this story. Nyla had lost everything due to greed and ego. I had gained a fortune, but lost 18 years with someone who never truly valued me. Melissa had died alone, except for my Sunday visits. There was no victory here, only painful lessons and permanent scars. After the sentencing, I decided it was time to do something with the inheritance. I'd been living for almost 3 months as if it didn't exist. I was still in my small apartment, working at the same construction site, driving the same old car. The only difference was the wooden box hidden in my closet with documents certifying I was a multimillionaire. It was such an absurd reality that sometimes I'd wake up thinking it had all been a strange dream, but it wasn't. It was real, and I needed to decide what to do with it. I met with Camillo again in his office. This time we talked for hours. I asked him about my options. He explained I could live without working the rest of my life, that the interest from investments generated more money than I could spend, that I could buy houses, cars, travel the world, have any luxury I wanted. But as he spoke, I thought of Melissa, how she lived modestly despite having all that fortune, how she never boasted, never showed off, never let money define her. And I thought of Nyla, how the promise of money transformed her into someone unrecognizable. I told Camillo I wanted to create a foundation dedicated to the care of elderly people. I wanted to build centers where seniors could live with dignity, receive medical care, have activities, feel valued. Places where they wouldn't be forgotten by their families, where they wouldn't die alone in empty houses. I wanted the foundation to be named in honor of Melissa. I wanted her fortune, accumulated in silence for decades, to serve to care for people like her. Camillo smiled for the first time since I'd met him. He told me that was exactly what Melissa would have wanted. We spent the following weeks working on the legal documents. We created the Melissa Contreras Foundation with an initial endowment of $200 million. The rest of the money I divided into secure investments that would generate passive income to sustain the foundation long-term and cover my basic needs. I didn't want mansions or luxury cars. I just wanted stability and purpose. Camillo helped me hire a team of professionals, administrators, social workers, doctors, architects, people who understood the vision and could make it reality. The first center we built on the outskirts of the city, near where Melissa had lived. We bought a large plot of land and designed a modern but cozy building. Private rooms with full bathrooms, bright common areas, spacious gardens, a library, a movie theater, art workshops, an equipped medical office. We hired qualified and committed staff, nurses, doctors, therapists, cooks, cleaning staff. We established fair salaries and good benefits. We wanted the people who work there to feel valued too. The center opened 6 months after the project began. We called it Casa Melissa. It had capacity for 50 people. The first week it filled completely. Seniors who'd been alone, forgotten, ignored by their families, now had a place where someone cared about them, where they ate breakfast together, talked, laughed. I saw an 80-year-old lady cry with happiness because someone remembered she liked chamomile tea. I saw a 75-year-old man play chess for the first time in 10 years because he finally had company. I visited Casa Melissa every Sunday, just as I used to visit Melissa. I sat with the residents, listened to their stories, played cards, shared lunch. I didn't go as the founder or the benefactor. I went as Eliseo, a 49-year-old man who understood what it meant to be invisible, who knew what it was to be discarded, forgotten, considered insufficient. The seniors accepted me as one of their own. They told me about their lives, their families who no longer called, their dreams they thought had died, and I listened to them, truly listened to them as Melissa had listened to me. Meanwhile, my personal life remained simple. I continued working at the construction company. Enrique had offered me a promotion after learning about the inheritance, but I declined. I explained that work gave me structure, purpose, normalcy, that I didn't want to lose that. He understood. I stayed in my small apartment. I never moved to something bigger. I didn't need more space. I bought a new car, but nothing ostentatious. A reliable and efficient sedan, nothing to draw attention. I stopped checking social media, looking for information about Nyla. It was a morbid habit I needed to break. I didn't know where she was, what she was doing, how she was surviving, and I decided I didn't need to know. She'd chosen her path. I'd chosen mine. Our lives no longer intersected. Some acquaintances asked me if I didn't feel satisfaction seeing her fall, if I didn't enjoy the cruel irony of the whole situation. The truth is, no, I didn't feel satisfaction. I only felt a deep sadness for the waste of everything, for the lost years, for the person she'd been before ambition consumed her. A year after Casa Melissa opened, we opened a second center in another city, then a third. The foundation grew beyond what I imagined. We started offering not only residents, but also day programs for seniors living with their families. Art classes, music, adapted exercise, free medical care, transportation, nutritious meals, all designed to give them dignity and joy in their later years. The media began to cover the foundation positively. They wanted to interview me, make documentaries, tell my story. I accepted some interviews, but always with one condition: don't talk about Nyla, don't talk about the past drama. Only talk about Melissa, about the seniors, about the work we were doing. In one of those interviews, a journalist asked me what I'd learned from this whole experience. I thought about that question for several seconds before answering. I said, I learned that money reveals who we truly are. It doesn't change us. It only amplifies what was already there. If you're generous, money allows you to be more generous. If you're selfish, money makes you more selfish. I learned that relationships based on convenience crumble at the first change of circumstances. I learned that stability and loyalty are treasures more valuable than any bank account. And I learned that revenge doesn't bring peace. Peace comes from letting go, from moving on, from building something meaningful with what you have. The journalist seemed moved by the answer. The article he published went viral. Thousands of people shared it. Some wrote me messages of support. Others shared their own stories of betrayal, loss, and reconstruction. I realized my story resonated with many because we've all been underestimated at some point. We've all been considered insufficient by someone, and we all need to remember that our worth doesn't depend on others' validation. 2 years after the divorce, I received an email. It was from an address I didn't recognize. The subject simply said apology. I opened it with a racing heart. It was from Nyla. The message was long, obviously written after many attempts and drafts. It said she'd spent 2 years in intensive therapy, that she'd worked humble jobs to slowly pay off her debts, that she'd lost contact with most of her friends and family, that she lived in a tiny apartment and took 2 buses to get to her job at a call center, that she'd hit rock bottom in ways she never imagined possible. But it also said that bottom had forced her to look in the mirror for the first time in years, to recognize she'd been cruel, superficial, selfish, that she'd valued the wrong things and discarded what really mattered, that I'd been the best man in her life, and she destroyed everything for a fantasy. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't asking for help. She just said she needed me to know she was sorry, that she understood if I could never forgive her, that she didn't expect a reply. She just needed to say it. The email ended with, "I wish you all the happiness in the world, Eliseo. You deserve it more than anyone I know." I read that email 5 times, then saved it in a special folder and didn't reply. Not because I was cruel or vengeful, but because replying would mean reopening a door that needed to remain closed. Her apology was for her, not for me. It was part of her healing process. I'd already healed in my own way. I'd already found my peace. Replying would only complicate that. So I left the email there, saved but unanswered, like a closed chapter of a book I'd already finished reading. Life continued. The foundation's centers kept growing. My work in construction remained stable. My Sundays at Casa Melissa continued to be the most rewarding part of my week. I knew some of the residents for years until they passed away. I attended their funerals. I mourned their departure and then met new residents who needed the same as the previous ones. To be seen, heard, valued. The cycle continued, and I was honored to be a part of it. 3 years after the divorce, my life had found a quiet rhythm I never imagined possible. I woke up every morning without the weight of bitterness. I worked with purpose. I spent time with people I genuinely cared about. The foundation had grown to 7 centers in different cities, helping over 300 seniors. Each center bore Melissa's name with some variation. Casa Melissa, Residencia Melissa, Jardines Melissa. I wanted her name to live on in ways she never sought in life, but completely deserved. One Sunday afternoon, I was in Casa Melissa playing dominoes with Don Hugo, an 82-year-old man who had been a math teacher and had endless stories about his students. He won every game because I was never good with numbers that way. As we played, one of the nurses approached and told me there was a visitor asking for me, insisting it was important. I asked Don Hugo to wait a moment and went to the reception area. The woman waiting wasn't Nyla. It was someone I hadn't seen in years. Her name was Claudia. She'd been Nyla's co-worker at her old company. I vaguely remembered her from some social gathering. She looked nervous, wringing her hands. She greeted me timidly and asked if we could talk in private. We went out to the garden where there were benches under the trees. We sat down. She took a deep breath before speaking. She told me she was there on behalf of Nyla, that Nyla didn't know she was there, that this was something Claudia felt she needed to do for her own conscience. She explained that she and Nyla had rekindled their friendship in the last year, that Nyla was working hard to rebuild her life, that she'd paid almost half of her debts, that she attended therapy twice a week, that she'd completely left social media, that she lived modestly and quietly, that she was a completely different person from who she'd been during those 2 months of madness. Claudia told me Nyla had tried to commit suicide 8 months after the collapse. that they'd found her in her apartment after she took all her sleeping pills, that she was hospitalized for 2 weeks, that experience was the true breaking point. The moment she decided she had 2 options: die or completely rebuild herself from scratch. She chose to rebuild and was doing it slowly and painfully, one day at a time. I listened in silence. Part of me felt compassion. Another part felt that information didn't change anything. Claudia continued. She told me she wasn't there to ask me for money or material help. She was there to ask me something different. She asked me if I could ever consider forgiving Nyla. Not necessarily talking to her or having a relationship, just forgiving her in my heart. Because Claudia believed Nyla could never completely forgive herself until she knew I had forgiven her. I replied honestly. I told her, Claudia, I appreciate you coming. I appreciate you caring about your friend, but forgiveness doesn't work that way. It's not something granted because someone else requests it or because enough time has passed. Forgiveness is an internal process that each person handles in their own way. I've let go of the anger. I've let go of the resentment. I've built a life that brings me peace. That's the closest to forgiveness I can offer. But reconciliation, friendship, even communication, that's not going to happen. Not because I'm cruel, but because it's not healthy for either of us. I explained that Nyla needed to learn to forgive herself without my validation. That part of growing was accepting some things we break can't be repaired, that some relationships we destroy can't be rebuilt. And that's okay. That life goes on anyway. That she could build a new life without needing my absolution. Claudia listened with tears in her eyes, nodded slowly, thanked me for my honesty, and left. That conversation left me thinking for days. I wondered if I was being too harsh, if I should show more mercy. But then I remembered not only the laugh, but everything that came after. How Nyla publicly humiliated me. How she built her image on my destruction. How she called me small in front of thousands of people. And I understood that my decision to keep my distance wasn't punishment. It was protection. Protection of my peace, of my emotional stability, of the life I'd worked so hard to build. The following months brought unexpected changes. I met a woman named Karina at a foundation event. No, it wasn't Nyla's cousin. It was another Karina, a 45-year-old geriatric doctor who had started volunteering at one of our centers. She was intelligent, compassionate, dedicated to her work. We talked several times after that. Occasional coffee, simple lunches, nothing forced, nothing urgent. Just 2 people enjoying each other's company. After 6 months of those casual conversations, she invited me to dinner. A real dinner at a restaurant with the clear intention it was a date. I accepted nervously. It had been years since I'd been in that situation. The dinner was pleasant. We talked about work, family, dreams, disappointments. She knew my story. She'd seen the articles, but she never judged me for them. She told me something that stayed with me. The past shapes you, but it doesn't define you. You decide who you are today. I didn't fall in love immediately. It wasn't like in the movies. It was slow, gradual, built on honest conversations and shared time. After a year, she moved in my small apartment. She laughed when she saw how basic it was. She asked me why I didn't live in something bigger, more comfortable. Considering my resources, I explained this place represented my reconstruction, that every used piece of furniture, every simple wall, reminded me I don't need luxury to be happy. She understood. She didn't try to change anything. Karina and I built something different from what I had with Nyla. There was no drama, no power games, no competition. Just companionship. 2 people who'd lived enough life to know what really mattered. She had her own money, her own successful career. She didn't need anything material from me, and I didn't need anything from her except her genuine company. It was simple, and simplicity, I discovered, was underestimated. One day, almost 4 years after the divorce, I was walking through the mall with Karina, buying basic things for the apartment when I saw Nyla. She was working in a clothing store. She wore the store uniform, folding shirts, organizing hangers. She looked older, more tired, but also more real. Less makeup, less pretense, more human. Our eyes met for a second. She recognized me immediately. I saw panic in her face, then shame, then resignation. Karina noticed my tension, asked me if I was okay. I pointed discreetly and told her, "That's Nyla." Karina watched her for a moment, then squeezed my hand. She asked if I wanted to leave. I shook my head. I'm not going to run away. She made her decisions. I made mine. We both live with the consequences. There's no reason to run away. We continued our shopping normally. Nyla stayed in the back of the store, avoiding our aisle. She didn't try to approach, she didn't try to talk, and I didn't seek confrontation. When we left the store, Karina asked me how I felt. I told her the truth. Empty. I didn't feel satisfaction seeing her there. I didn't feel vengeance fulfilled. I only felt the weight of everything that could have been different if she'd chosen differently. If she'd valued what we had instead of chasing a fantasy. Karina hugged me in the middle of the mall. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to say anything. She was just there, present, solid, real. 5 years after that Tuesday, that changed everything. I found myself sitting in the garden of Casa Melissa on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Don Hugo had passed away 6 months ago, and his favorite chair next to the rose bush remained empty. Nobody sat there out of respect. The other residents called it Hugo's chair and sometimes left flowers on it. I used to sit nearby when I needed to think. That day I was thinking about how I'd gotten here, about the man I was 5 years ago and the man I was now. Karina and I had gotten married 6 months ago in a small ceremony. Only 20 people, residents of Casa Melissa, some co-workers, Lawyer Camillo, Enrique, my boss. Nothing ostentatious. A ceremony in the same garden where I was sitting now. Melissa would have approved that. A simple, genuine, unpretentious celebration. Karina wore an ivory dress she bought at a regular store. I wore the same suit I'd worn at my wedding to Nyla 23 years ago. I'd had some alterations made, but it was the same. Karina laughed when I told her. She told me only I would recycle a previous wedding suit, but she said it with affection, not mockery. The foundation had grown to 12 centers, over 600 seniors under our care. We'd expanded programs to include hospice, palliative care, occupational therapy. We'd created jobs for over 300 people, and every Sunday, without fail, I kept visiting. I kept sitting with the residents, listening to their stories, playing cards, sharing meals. It was my sacred ritual, my way of honoring Melissa, my way of remembering why all this mattered. 3 months ago, I received another email from Nyla. It was shorter than the previous one. It said she'd finished paying all her debts, that it had taken her 4.5 years, but she'd done it, that she worked 2 jobs, lived with a minimum, but had fulfilled every financial obligation, that she'd completed her community service, that her probation had ended, that she had officially closed that chapter of her life. She wasn't asking for anything, just sharing the news as if she needed someone to know she'd done it, that she'd survived. This time I replied, not with much, just with 3 lines, "I'm glad you found your way. I wish you the best in your future. Take care, Nyla." It was all I could offer. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't reconciliation. It was simply recognition of shared humanity, of 2 people who once loved each other and were now strangers who wished each other well from afar. She replied with a simple, "Thank you, Eliseo." That was all. There were no more emails after that. Claudia, Nyla's friend who visited me years ago, contacted me again a month ago. She told me Nyla had gone back to school, that she was taking night classes to get a certification in social work, that she wanted to work helping people in difficult situations, that she'd found purpose in her own suffering. Claudia thanked me for replying to that last email. She told me those 3 lines had meant more to Nyla than I could imagine, that it had given her a closure she desperately needed. I asked Claudia why she was telling me all this, why she kept acting as an intermediary. She was honest. She told me because my story with Nyla had affected her deeply, that she too had been seeking external validation, living for appearances, measuring her worth by superficial things, that seeing Nyla's collapse so closely woke her up, made her reevaluate her own priorities. And that part of her own healing was making sure both Nyla and I found peace. I thanked her and wished her the best. It was a strangely healing conversation. My work in construction continued until a year ago when I finally decided to retire. Not because I needed to financially, but because the foundation required more time and attention. Enrique organized a small farewell. My colleagues gave me a plaque that read, "To the best engineer and best man we knew." I hung it in my office at the foundation's headquarters. It was a reminder that honest work, no matter how ordinary it seems, has dignity and value. Karina became the medical director of all our centers. She left her private practice to dedicate herself completely to the foundation. She created care protocols that other organizations now copy. She trained dozens of doctors and nurses in compassionate geriatric care. Together, we built something bigger than ourselves, something that would survive long after we were gone. That idea gave me deep peace. 2 weeks ago, I received a letter in the physical mail. It was from an address I didn't recognize. I opened it with curiosity. Inside was a single handwritten sheet. The handwriting was Nyla's. The letter read, "Eliseo, I know you don't expect to hear from me, and you probably shouldn't, but I reached a milestone today I need to share with someone who understands a journey. I graduated from my social work program. I got a job at a shelter for women in crisis. I'm going to help people who lost everything rebuild their lives. I know what that's like now. I know what it costs. I don't expect your approval or your pride. I just needed you to know the person I was when I hurt you no longer exists. She died 5 years ago. The person I am now is trying to do some good with what's left. Thank for the 3 lines you sent me. They gave me permission to move forward. I wish you all the happiness with Karina." I saw her photo in the article about the foundation. She looks like someone who really sees you. That's all you always deserved. Take care. The letter had no return address. I showed the letter to Karina that night. She read it twice, then looked at me. She asked me how I felt. I told her the truth. Relieved. Relieved that Nyla had found a way forward. Relieved that she'd transformed her destruction into something constructive. Relieved that we had both survived that terrible chapter and emerged as better versions of ourselves. Karina nodded. She told me, "Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it simply means letting go and wishing well. I think you both got there." She was right. Now, sitting in this garden where Don Hugo used to tell me about his students, where Melissa would have wanted to be, where I built something meaningful from the ashes of my former life. I understand things that I didn't understand 5 years ago. I understand money doesn't solve character problems, that stability is more valuable than excitement, that being invisible doesn't mean not having worth, that people show who they truly are when they believe they have power, and that true wealth isn't in bank accounts, but in genuine relationships and meaningful purpose. If I could go back and change something, I don't know if I would. Those 18 years with Nyla shaped me. That brutal divorce freed me. That unexpected inheritance gave me the opportunity to create real impact. The pain was immense, yes, but the growth was too. And now, at 54, married to a woman who values me, running a foundation that helps hundreds, surrounded by purpose and peace, I can say something I never imagined I could say. I'm grateful. Grateful for the entire journey, including the parts that hurt so much. Melissa taught me silent generosity is more powerful than noisy ostentation. Nyla taught me true character emerges in moments of temptation. Karina taught me real love is quiet, stable, without drama. And I learned being called small by someone who values the wrong things isn't an insult. It's liberation. Life continues. Sundays are still sacred. The foundation keeps growing. Seniors still need care and dignity. And I keep showing up day after day, not because I'm extraordinary, but because it's the right thing to do. It turns out being ordinary, being stable, being reliable are underestimated superpowers. They're the superpowers that build real lives, lasting relationships, meaningful legacies. And if Nyla is somewhere helping other women rebuild their lives, then maybe her story also had purpose. Maybe her fall was necessary for her transformation. It's not my place to judge that. It's only my place to follow my own path with integrity. And that's exactly what I plan to do. One Sunday at a time, one conversation at a time, one life at a time. In the end, the greatest fortune I inherited wasn't the $640 million. It was the lesson that my worth never depended on someone else's opinion. It was always there, silent but solid, waiting for me to recognize it. And now that I have, nobody can ever take it from me.